Good morning and welcome to Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. While various products may be discussed during the course of this program, please note that these discussions are intended only to educate you about financial topics. They are broad in scope and do not consider your individual personal financial situation. You should work with a qualified financial professional in collaboration with your attorney and tax advisor before implementing any financial decisions which will affect your personal financial situation. Thrivent financial representatives cannot provide legal or tax advice. Your local Thrivent representatives are Wayne Grunkley and Alan Sogstead, 215 Atlantic Avenue, Morris. Call 589-1731. And now, Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell.
Hey, welcome everyone to another edition of Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. He joins us here on this, this Saturday. Scott has been absolutely, for someone, I'm back with you here this week. And one thing, people are questioning, we were just talking about before we got on the air, was how's the apple orchard doing? Because that's what we really...
Absolutely. It's interesting because...
That's the other thing that's been mentioned a lot.
And there was a lot of stuff on the news the night before about, the apple orchards are going to get, hit hard. And, frankly, an apple can take a pretty good frost. It can actually go down to about 26 degrees.
Whoa.
And as long as it's only there for a couple hours. And I know at my orchard we got down to 31, which was really nothing. It actually helps sweeten the apples up a bit when they get a little frost. So we did not mind it one little bit. Plus, you know what it does to mosquitoes. And, not that we have many because it's been so dry. But, boy, the few that were there I think are gone.
It's a nice thing that it's taking care of that, but that's not the real reason we're here today,
is it? No, it certainly isn't. And we have two guests today. We're really talking today about people that are underemployed and how we go about creating a benefit package for those people who, maybe they have been an employee of some firm at some point in time, and recently, because of the recession or other reasons, they are now either a consultant or they're working part-time, or a lot of people have had to cobble their benefit packages together that in the past had them pretty much laid out for them. So I have two guests today, and Dennis Jasperson from New Ulm has been on the show twice before. So Dennis, we're delighted to have you back. Thanks
it's always
for being
good to be here. And by the way, this weather doesn't help my water skiing at all.
In a way, Dennis, you really think about this, there's fewer boats on the lake. That means there's less traffic.
That is true.
And you do have a wetsuit. I know this about you.
Yes, I do.
Okay. And we have Tim Reinke, also from New Ulm, here with us. And so, Tim, introduce yourself a little bit to our listeners. They know a little bit about Dennis, but they might not know you at all.
Hi, Scott. Thank you. My name is Tim Reinke, and I've been with Thrivent 5 years in and out as a full-time and a part-time rep. Lived in New Ulm since 1996. Born and raised in Fairmont. Got a wife and two kids. And I'm glad to say that fishing season is back upon us. I'm looking forward to walleye bite in Dennis's neighborhood. So look out for the fishing boats.
Absolutely. Well, so you've been in New Ulm since '96. So you're about halfway to membership in New Ulm, aren't you?
That's you're probably right.
Yeah, you're about halfway there. I mean, they trust you now, I'm sure, but you're not quite a member, and you got to be there a little bit longer.
I think halfway's a good mark.
You got to be full-blooded German, and then you got to at least live in the town for 30, 35 years, or be born in town. If you're born in town, you're good.
It's a great town.
Right, and absolutely. I am full-blooded German, so I'm halfway there.
Yeah, absolutely. Good deal. Well, at any rate, today we've got the both of you on really to have a discussion about benefit packages for the underemployed. Underemployed, I heard a lot of things, but what is underemployed? That is really those folks that are working, but they might not, as I said, be fully employed, and they don't have W-2 jobs. And I'm never going to claim that fully employed means you have to have a W-2 job. There's a lot of self-employed folks out there that are more than fully employed. But for those people that have kind of put it together, they're back working, but they don't have a benefit package, or the other people that I really want to listen hard today is the self-employed people that have really not taken the time they need to take to really address their own personal benefit package. Because most self-employed people, as you guys know, they're worried about, whether it's a production company or a sales company, they're worried about keeping their business going. They don't worry that much about themselves, and sometimes that's not such a good thing. So we're going to talk about benefit packages today. So, Dennis, in this environment, we've got all these folks that are underemployed. they've taken jobs that don't have full benefits. How should they approach this new setting that they're in?
Thanks. Part of the issue is, do they have a job? First, we need to find somewhere where you're going to be able to get a job that you have a long-range future with, hopefully. Then many of these positions are going to have a waiting period, a probation period, where they'll get benefits at a certain period of time, could be 30 days, 90 days, even up to a year. There are several short-term packages that people should be looking at to bridge some of these gaps.
Sure.
Then we're going to have to look and find out, how do you advance inside the company to bring yourself into a position where they want to talk about benefits, where they want to keep you. Remember, benefits from a company are some way for the company that says, we appreciate you, we value you, we don't want you to go to the other side and have a different position. So they are hoping that you're going to get far enough that you're going to have your own benefits.
And as you know, a lot of companies right now have wanted to bring people back to work because a lot of companies are actually doing quite well and their earnings are up. But they have not wanted to make that commitment necessarily to, make them a full-time employee. So what you're saying is, hey, you know what? Your first job is to do your job and do it well. And consequently, hopefully they say, hey, we got to keep this person around.
That's right. If they do a good job, if they're willing to go back to school, if they're willing to retrain, let's face it, the world of the gold watch is long behind us. The U-Inc. world is coming more and more.
Yep.
10 years ago, we had over 65% of the people with fringe benefits and health insurance.
Yep.
This week I read we had less than 55% and dropping in a hurry.
Right.
So we have to be proactive. We have to be able to manage our own retirement plans. We have to be able to manage our own benefit package.
Okay, so if we give people, Dennis, an order and say, what should I focus on first? What's the first thing on this list that they should be paying attention to?
Well, they need a job first, but once they get to that point, then I think short-term health benefits where the company doesn't provide the package yet, and there's a lot of short-term plans out there. Then let's start looking at becoming your own benefits manager. And that's always an interesting thing because many people are going to have. Tim here has had a variety of opportunities to work in the corporate world, and he has been able to bring his retirement plans with him as he moves from company to company.
Sure.
He's a little bit more shy, so he does need to remember that Tim has been controller or CFO or primary accountant for a variety of different industries. Tim, do you want to open on that one?
Sure. I think you're right on, Dennis, that it's not uncommon for employers when they bring employees back to bring them on a part-time basis.
Right.
And usually it takes a minimum amount of hours per week to qualify for certain benefits.
And there is some intentionality. Let's not be naive that they often will schedule people for that number of hours to keep them from getting benefits because as a business owner, benefits are expensive.
Absolutely. And you're leading right into my next comment is that in my time in the corporate world, with a large dairy co-op in the New Ulm area and a large hog operation, they're running on budgets, and that means they're looking at the benefit packages that they're providing employees, and they're cutting back, and the deductibles are going up, the premiums are going up, so in a sense these people need to look outside maybe for a dental package or a vision package that the business no longer offers.
Right, and there's certain things that you absolutely have to have, so that if you don't have them offered by the company, or if you don't have them offered by yourself, if you're self-employed, what are you think, what's the very first thing you got to get covered? I would assume that it's your core health insurance.
Absolutely. And anything that's important to keeping the family, running in a sense.
Right. Okay, and then one of the other things, and we'll talk more about this in the show here today, is if you approach this problem as a statistician and you say, gosh, I really want to think of what I had at my past job, people will say, well, I know that I had my health insurance. I know I had my retirement plan. If you really go back and look at that statement, you're also going to find that you usually had some disability insurance and some life insurance that's offered. Now, most people have some life insurance outside of their work. They have some that's portable. You talked about bringing their retirement plan with them. Well, they have some portable life insurance they bring with them. But very few people have any portability in their disability plan. So the disability plan goes completely away, and you know what? It's a huge risk, because if you're a statistician, you'd always get disability insurance before you got life insurance. Because for a 40-year-old, I don't remember the exact number, but for a 40-year-old, you're something like 15 to 20 times more likely to suffer a long-term disability before you hit 65 than you are to die. So that's a catastrophic loss. And when we read in the paper that people go through these bankruptcies because of medical things, if you read deeper, what happens is it's a disability that caused them to lose their job, and the extra expenses without the income is what kills them so much of the time. So that's one of those things that can take your financial life backwards enormously. So we want to talk a little bit about that as we go forward here today.
It's one of the many things. And Scott, when we're talking about this, is there a way for people who have seen their income drop, and there's a lot of people that have had that happen over the last, since 2006, that's happened to a lot of people. How can they make lemonade out of the lemons they've been dealt?
There are a couple of opportunities, and one of the big ones is, very frankly, that Dennis said a minute ago that a lot of these people, including Tim here, was able to take some of his retirement dollars with him, and that's the case for most people, is that they're fully vested in their 401k. It depends upon how long they worked there, and they've got some other retirement plans around there. Well, if you think of, what happens when you're in, what are the benefits of, even for a short period of time, being in a low tax bracket? Well, if you're going to do any kind of conversion from a regular retirement plan to a Roth IRA, this is the time to take a look at it. So that begs another question, of course. Well, why would I want to convert from a regular IRA or from a regular retirement plan into a Roth IRA? And very, very simply is because if you start to think about a tax strategy and what we call the tax triangle, you want to get some balance between those things that are taxed now, and that would be things like CDs and things that pay dividends, those things that are taxed later, and those are things like your 401k, your 403b, your 457, your IRA, all of those qualified plans.
Okay, you're hitting me with a lot of numbers here.
I know I am, but people think of qualified plans are those things that I took a tax deduction for my contribution. All those things are taxed later. And then there's that category of taxed never, okay? Now, whenever you say taxed never, well, gosh, I don't know, maybe the tax laws will change on these things, but there's a couple things that we, generally speaking, put in that bucket, and Roth IRAs are some of that, part of that bucket. So if you don't have anything in the tax never bucket, might be a time to take advantage of a lower income tax bracket and get some of that converted.
Scott, thanks for asking that question. To me, the idea when you have a change in career and you have the opportunity to convert from a 401k to an IRA back over to a Roth IRA at a lower tax bracket, let's face the facts. 30 years from now, do you think we're going to have more government services? Do you think we're going to have less taxes than we do today? It's pretty simple.
Yep. And how much are we going to have to pay for what's happening right now, very frankly? So the idea that tax rates are going to stay the same and not go up is very unlikely, in my opinion, as well. I think that's what you're getting at. We're going to see probably higher tax rates, and we're probably going to see some reduction in the kinds of deductions that we are able to take today as well. So more of our money will be taxable, that's my prediction, at a higher rate.
Yep, no question about it.
So, this is actually for the both of you. Many people, Tim and Dennis, really don't understand their economic package. When they get a job, they don't understand what comes with it in terms of the benefit package. What risks do you think they take by not getting a good handle on what comes with this besides the salary and the vacation?
Vacation? I didn't know that was available.
I threw you there, didn't I?
I'm sorry. I'm self-employed. I take my own vacation. Well, most people, when they start a job, they get handed this really thick book, and it's their benefits package. They have to sign up for this stuff, and they don't really understand what's going on. And one of the bigger challenges they have is how do you, once you get to the point where you're now getting back on a 401k plan, they hand you this Greek and Hebrew type of information, and you really don't know what you're looking at.
Right.
I've had the opportunity to help many individuals as they work through their 401k. How do they invest it? What type of dollars do they walk by if they don't participate in that, because if there's free money, matching money from the 401k company, it's necessary to know that information. So.
Very good. And so we're going to take a quick break here in a minute, but when we come back, I hope people stay tuned in today, because we're going to talk about how do you maximize that economic package and make sure that you're signed up for everything, what's the questions you should ask, and how do you make sure that these benefits come to you.
The U-Inc question.
Absolutely.
More financial strategies right after this.
How would your financial life improve if you changed just one thing? Avoid ATM fees, make your gifts rather than buy them, protect yourself from identity theft, save more for your family's future. The list goes on. If you heard something today on financial strategies that motivates you to change one thing in your life, Thrivent Financial for Lutherans has free tips and resources you can use to do one thing differently. Find more at thrivent.com/one thing. Think about your finances, your lifestyle, your wants versus your needs. What one thing can you change today and see the impact tomorrow? Perhaps your family will save all your change for a month and donate it to charity. Maybe you'll finally write a will. Whether you choose to start simple or take a big step, that one thing can really make a difference. If you heard something today on financial strategies that motivates you to change one thing in your financial life, Thrivent Financial for Lutherans has free tips and resources you can use to do one thing differently. Find more at thrivent.com/one thing.
Welcome back, everyone, to Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. We got a couple of guests in the studio, not just one. We have two guests this week. I don't know what to do with all these people.
Try and keep it interesting here, you know.
It's always interesting with Scott Wardell, of course. It's always interesting with Scott.
In the palatial stadium here that we get to broadcast out of.
Dennis Jasperson joining us there. He's one of our guests, along with Tim Renke joining us as well here on Financial Strategies. And it's a fun day. It's always interesting when we have so many people in the studio. But we were talking about our big topic this week is underemployed people. Not unemployed, but underemployed. And we were talking about economic packages before we went to break.
Right, and we're actually really coupling underemployed along with the self-employed, because these are two groups that frankly have not spent the time and are at risk to not have as full a benefit package as they need to. So one of the things that I want to make sure that if you are working for someone and you are newly employed as well, that you make sure that you go in, you find out enough about this benefit package to find out when you're eligible for the 401k. One of the number one things that you should always do with your finances is make sure you have signed up enough to get the matching funds on your 401k. Economically, this is a thing that cannot be beat, and a lot of people don't even know that it's available to them. So go in and do that, find out what's in the rest of your package, and obviously, if you're underemployed, that probably means you don't have any benefits that are offered to you. You've been hired as a consultant. You're now a 1099 employee, not a W-2 employee. So then you've got to start creating your own. The other thing is that you've really got to do some protection about what you've already accumulated, maybe in a past retirement plan, and that's where they really should take some time to sit down with their financial advisor.
Right, Scott. One thing that employers can do a good job of, and some don't do as well, is orientate their employees on their benefit packages. And I think it's a good idea if they don't understand the checklist and what they're signing up for, to have a discussion with their financial advisor and just review that, and so they know what they are purchasing. And if they have a spouse that is at another employer, to compare the benefit packages to make sure you're not creating any redundancy.
Right. That's a great point, by the way. Yeah, because oftentimes, you do the pros and the cons, and you might find that it's cheaper to cover your family with one package or another. But oftentimes, it's really the most or the least expensive to cover yourself under one plan, cover your spouse plus children under another plan. So you got to do the math, because it comes out different depending upon where you're actually at. But Dennis, let's go to you here for a second here, as we're talking about the U-Inc. as a term that you're using relative to these 401ks and old retirement plans. What should people be doing?
It's amazing the number of people that have 401k plans that don't realize that they're a frozen account. They can even have them changed out from underneath them. If they're a small account, they can be more or less flushed. If they don't have a certain size, they're going to be distributed back out to them. This is their retirement plan, and they need to be careful about using it. There are times when that 401k plan can become seed money, but the majority of times I want to see them put it into their long-range plan. I don't know about you, Scott. I'm up to number 4 on some of my individuals. Tim here has had more than one position, and he's probably had 2 or 3 different 401k plans that he's rolled into his retirement plan as he's moved along his career.
Right.
And that's a normal reaction. We don't see the gold watches anymore. It's now up to you to be your own benefits manager.
Well, and people that have been in any particular career for a long term, often they're, companies get acquired. So they say, well, I still have a 401k plan with the company that I used to be part of before my company got bought out, because they don't always merge them. The other thing is last week I was working with a school teacher who had taken out a 403b plan, which is like a 401k, except for it's for the school teachers. And then all of a sudden the provider changed, so she took out another one. And then the school system changed the rules and said, well, we're going to limit the number of providers that you have, and your plan is out. So she took out yet another one, and then eventually ended up with a 4th plan, plus a 457 plan, plus a Minnesota deferred comp plan. So, here's one person with 6 different retirement plans, and you know what? The odds of any one person getting that integrated to say, gosh, I've got good investment balance, it's just so, the chances are that it's askew and it's not coordinated.
Here's a real interesting question for that. If she's got all those different things, and she may have gone through life changes because she got married, may have been divorced, may have gotten remarried, what's her beneficiary like?
Yeah, that's a good thing. Thank you, Dennis, for bringing that up, because often they've got beneficiaries. We see this all the time, of course, with people's life insurance. Their parents took their life insurance out on them, and on an infant, they named themselves as the beneficiary. I had a tragic case this year where a client who had been chasing to sit down and do a review at a very young age, in his 40s, died. He still had his parents as his beneficiary of his life insurance and not his wife. And what was even more tragic is his parents were deceased, so it had to go to the contingent beneficiaries, and his wife was no place on it.
Right.
So this is something, people don't think about this, but oftentimes when we call them and say, we just want to do a quick review with you, if we accomplish nothing else, we get that cleaned up.
Right.
Absolutely. Right. So at any rate, we've been talking here about these benefit plans, and people are really, I just mentioned life insurance, they're often confused about how much life insurance they should have and how much should be permanent, how much should be term. And, this is a question for everyone, but it's especially acute for people who do not have a benefit package for themselves. So nothing's in place. So Dennis, how do they go about thinking about this?
Well, you're asking a different question, and the bigger question that I always talk to folks about is, what does the insurance do?
Right.
On a bigger scale, life insurance basically has about 3 different functions for it. Number 1, it covers a debt, such as your mortgage, other types of loans that you may have. Number 2, it's there to replace an income. It's the most economical way to replace an income. And number 3, many times life insurance creates wealth for a goal, such as college funding or to start a house fund. Proper planning starts with asking that question first. What is its role? What's it supposed to do? Then you can develop. In some cases, with the newly employed, term insurance is the best product. Term insurance is basically a leased type of a thing. As they become more and more secure, we take them from struggling and barely surviving to more of a secure type of a household. Then we can start talking about converting some of that into an equity-based, we own the product versus leasing the product.
Right. And I understand what you're talking about there. And, of course, when people need a lot of life insurance, term is the least expensive way for them to go. But before 2008, I read a statistic. This is before our big recession, that the average person will change jobs 7 times in their life. That means for some of them, there's no gap in between that, but for many of them, there's a time gap in between. And I was talking to a guy the other day who's been out of work for 2 years. What that means is that if he has been depending on his company to provide 100% of his life insurance for him all that time, he's got lots of periods in his life where he has no life insurance whatsoever, and his family is at big-time risk. That's where portability and some of the permanent insurance might come in.
And the other question that we have to start thinking about is insurability, because at some point in time, most of us are going to fall off that insurability ladder. To have that coverage in your back pocket where it's there, it's not going to be taken away from you, even if you change jobs, is a big issue in my book.
Right. And, of course, the term insurance that people get is also portable if they happen to own it. And as you guys know, the ability for them to convert it is a key that they have to look for. Because if you say, well, gosh, I got to get I don't have a lot of cash flow if you're unemployed, so maybe you are back to term, but you can own it yourself as opposed to having it owned by the company that might have let you go. Absolutely.
That's a good point, Scott. Being unemployed, an employer, your former employer, will offer you a COBRA type coverage or portability, as you mentioned. And as you take those with you, each month those costs tend to go up with the COBRA and the portability. As you click another age or an age bracket,
right,
those costs go up. So I think as an alternative view, an alternative resource is to look at some other options that may better fit your situation.
Right, and as you know, good parts of COBRA are for a temporary, window of time, and then they go away. So that's why we're really talking about how can you personally own it, exactly. So.
All right, we're talking about underemployed and really self-employed people. That's our main topic, financial strategies, here with Scott Wardell. And as we continue on, if someone is looking or starting or changing their own retirement plan, what are some key things they should be thinking of, key considerations, and what type of plan might suit them the best then if you're trying to figure all that stuff out? Yeah,
there's really an entire checklist on this. So, for instance, let's just say that you're talking about a retirement plan and they're saying, you know what, I'm now a 1099 contractor, so that I'm working for a company. They don't offer me a retirement plan, and I need to get some dollars put away. And that usually means that you don't have any employees. Okay, now on the other hand, you might actually have started something that is bigger than you. You might have started a company and said, I'm going to have some employees, we're going to offer some services, we're going to hang our shingle out, now I've got some employees. And so depending upon how many employees that you have, or if you are in a partnership, there's a lot of different kinds of retirement plans that are available, and you have to really say, well, what's my obligation here for those employees? Because if cash flow is tight, you might want to just take care of the boss, that being you, for a period of time. And so I often ask people the simple question, well, if you are able to, how much would you put away this year? Well, if they give me a dollar figure that's less than $5,000, then the simple answer, folks, is get yourself a good old-fashioned IRA. And you don't have to cover anybody but yourself. So that's an alternative for those folks that are really, trying to keep up with the retirement plan. Because here's what's going to happen. A lot of these folks that are underemployed start to put nothing, I repeat, nothing away for themselves for retirement. And then a year goes by, they're hoping things get a little bit better. Another year goes by, they're hoping things get a little bit better. And all of a sudden, not only are they really underemployed, but the retirement plan starts to really suffer at exactly the same time. So you need to look into these things. Even if you say, gosh, if we scrimped and saved, we're going to be able to put $2,000 away towards our retirement, I wouldn't let that gap happen. I'd say do what you can, and maybe it is an IRA. Now, if in fact, let's take a different situation, guys, for a second, because I know you guys work with a lot of farmers, and as they are planning for their retirement plan, often they're in partnerships, often they have a few employees, so they've got some other options that are available to them. It could be a profit sharing plan, could be a SEP, simplified employee pension. There's a lot of different ways that they can look at their retirement and move forward, and it's going to depend on those things. Would you agree, Tim?
Absolutely, I agree.
Okay.
When we come back, I'd like to have a longer conversation about the missing parts of what happens when you don't plan as a self-employed. We've been talking quite a bit about the underemployed. When we come back, I'd like to talk more about why people who are self-employed should seek out good financial counsel.
Absolutely. Sounds good.
More of that with Financial Strategies when we come back after this.
Nearly 3 million members look to Thrivent Financial for Lutherans to help them achieve their financial goal. Nearly 3 million people know that Thrivent Financial is committed to excellence in financial services and caring for others. Get to know Thrivent Financial and the quality of products and services they can offer you. In Minnesota, you have a host of representatives to help you with your financial needs. Contact your local Thrivent representatives Wayne Grunkley and Alan Sogstead, 215 Atlantic Avenue, Morris. Call 589-1731 or call 1-855-346-4332. Registered representatives for securities offered through Thrivent Investment Management Incorporated, member FINRA and SIPC.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. We got a couple of guests in the studio this week, Dennis Jasperson and Tim Reinke joining us as well. We talked about underemployed. Now we're going to be talking more about self-employed people this week.
Absolutely. We're going to really spend the second half of the show in this arena of the small business owner. And, you know, Dennis and Tim, you know that small business owners tend to be kind of slow to start their retirement plans. And it's really out of necessity because they're interested in getting their business run, and they're typically reinvesting substantial amounts in their business, and that leaves the retirement plan off and off to the side. So what advice do you have for them and how they might approach their retirement plans?
Reinvesting into a person's business can really create a liquidity problem. When I was growing up, my family ran a concrete business in central Minnesota. My father worked very, very hard to build this successful business. The business went past him, and by the time he was ready to retire, we were not able to sell the business.
Right.
All of the work that he had done putting into that career of probably 50 years was we were selling the trucks, we were selling the machinery for scrap, we sold the property for a warehouse. So he didn't have a retirement plan per se. He was expecting the business to be his retirement plan.
Right. You know, I work with a few clients who work for a medical device company.
Sure.
And within that, one of the things they do is people tend to invest in the stuff that they know the most. So one day I was looking at a client's portfolio and I said, okay, your income comes entirely from a medical device company, and your investments are almost entirely with medical device companies. Now, you talk about diversification with folks, and you say, okay, we have standard diversification models, but what we rarely consider in a diversification model is other dependencies. And in this case, he's very dependent on that company for his income. Now he's dependent on that industry for his retirement. And the same is true for farmers, where they start to, you know, very frankly, or other small business people, because people like to invest in what they know, they tend to be very narrowly invested if, in fact, they are investing both their retirement investments as well as dependent on their income from the same thing. All of a sudden, commodity prices start to drop off, and both get, you know, hit with the bomb at the same exact time.
Right. So, no question that investing into your business is an important feature of being successful on your own, as this U
yeah.
Inc.
And I don't want to take away from that, because obviously investing in your own business is an important thing. But taking a few dollars and putting them in a broader category, you know, the old adage is don't put all your eggs in one basket. Well, this is an ideal situation where if you have all of your income is dependent upon a particular industry, so let's just say that you're in farming and it's all dependent upon grain prices, and then all of your assets as well are dependent on there, you're putting all your chips on one square, and a little diversity can really help that go a long way.
Well, if you don't pay yourself first, who will?
Right, exactly. So, you know, guys, farmers have had a pretty good crop prices in the last couple of years, and that's, I think, has presented some opportunities for them. So, you know, let's talk about what opportunities they have, and then let's talk about what you're going to suggest they do with that opportunity. Tim?
They need to look at some of the tax questions that they may be facing. To keep the income down, farmers have traditionally reinvested in their business.
Right.
You know, they're tax conscious about wanting to pay Uncle Sam at the end of the year or into March of the following year.
And people's lives and their business lives are run under their habits. So if their habit has been, as you said, buying more equipment, that's going to be probably the first thing they're going to look at.
And certainly, and age is a factor as well as they go along in their business. They don't want to expand anymore as they go along in age, and now they start to think about what does 62 mean or what does age 60 mean, and they look back and may or may not have accumulated some retirement. And I think you can go back to maybe the business planning process. Each year they're putting together a business plan or a budget for their farm or business and try to build in some sort of a savings plan geared towards retirement.
Absolutely. And what very few of them realize is, the deductibility of the retirement plans and how that could potentially, and I emphasize the word potentially, create their overall wealth in a way that we can actually draw for retirement. Now, obviously, a lot of farmers have a plan that when they retire, they're going to rent their farm, and that's going to be their primary retirement income. But to have a couple of other resources that they can draw on for the retirement. I've worked with farmers, since 1982 when I first got in this business. And when they've got a couple of different avenues, it really creates a different picture in terms of both wealth and in terms of their income.
Well, Scott, it's very hard to sell 3 acres of land.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, and frankly, and I'm not predicting anything here, by the way, but land prices, as we all know, are extremely high relative to historical levels. Now, maybe one day we'll look back and say, oh, those looked high at the time, but they weren't. But we've all seen this happen before, where land prices go up substantially based on what the commodity prices are doing, and they can be a bubble just like anything else.
Now, let me ask a question. I know a lot of farmers try and hand the farm down to the family.
Right.
How is that? Does that have any effect then on a retirement plan? If you're just if you're giving it to someone in the family, is that going to change things, or is it turn, like you said, with a renter? Is that what it turns into?
Well, here's a couple ways that they do it. Often, although there's certainly it's certainly all right, and many people do this, is that when the family starts to do the operation, of course, let's say that it's from a father to a son, from a father to a daughter, whatever it happens to be, is generally speaking, this adult but child will use the equipment and the things from dad, so that those cash outlays are substantially less, if at all, and then often they get some kind of break on the rent, because farming is a very, very difficult thing to get into today, and that helps create this particular bridge. But mom and dad still typically get some source of revenue, whether it is shares or whether it is cash rent from the farm.
Absolutely. One of the bigger problems that we have is we have sometimes where farm families will try to continue to farm past their prime. And now those children, as you're talking about, are in their 60s as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is often all, that they know, and they get often, to my experience at least, guys, great joy from doing it. I was talking to a farmer here a couple of weeks back, and we're, talking about, because it's a lot of physical hard work that, still with whether they're feeding cattle or milking some of them even, it is just an enormous amount of work. But this gentleman really reflected back on his work and said, I just have to admit, I just love it. So why would I quit doing it? Well, as we establish people's retirement goals and plans, the last thing we do is suggest to take away something that they actually love doing. So if you love it, fantastic, and keep producing the income out of that. So,
all right, let's talk a little about disability and what, as an independent contractor, we talked about underemployed, but as an independent contractor, what do you need to do to protect your family, especially with disability? Because that can be a big thing that can happen, as we talked earlier in the show.
Right, absolutely. And it is one of the areas that is most frequently missed. It's missed by the self-employed very, very often. When they look at their benefit package, they almost always look real closely at the health insurance, and they really don't understand disability. And first of all, let's clear up one particular point. Disability insurance and workman's compensation are not the same thing. So often people say, well, I have workers' comp. Well, workers' comp covers you if you get hurt on the job, okay? And most disabilities are not related, frankly, to you being hurt on the job, but some are. And workers' comp covers a limited amount. Disability insurance covers your income for when you get sick or sick or hurt and can't work.
And Scott, if you're the self-employed individual, don't forget you are the income-producing machine.
Right.
And you would never be a self-employed individual and not have building insurance, fire insurance. And yet most self-employed individuals do not have income insurance.
It is a huge, huge risk. And, you know, if you take a look at it and say, well, will this business go on and even operate without that key owner in place? And who all does that put at risk? Often it puts family members at risk. If you have employees, it actually puts them at risk too, because what's going to happen to a core business that is highly dependent on one or two individuals? So again, this is a spot where we really encourage people to sit down with a financial advisor and take a look at how do I manage this risk. It is really, really important that they do it, because you know, the statistics are not in your favor in terms of different kinds of risks that you might avoid or be self-insured for. This is one that you really should have high consideration for transferring to maybe some other company.
Right, Scott. I have a nephew in the Fairmont area where I was born and raised that is in carpentry.
Yes.
And we had the same discussion you were referring to that is good to have with your financial advisor. He understood what it meant if he was out without an income, if he got hurt or got sick.
Yeah, and some of those kinds of occupations, they have a buddy or somebody else they've seen this happen to, and that's their wake-up call. You know, and if you're in farming and you look around and you say, gosh, you know, I do know someone that, you know, got hurt and couldn't work, and, you know, good neighbors come to help, and that's wonderful, but you can't have 100% of it dependent on good neighbors, very frankly.
Exactly. And now this individual is going to be married soon and thinking about kids. So, you know, now we can start asking more questions, and the importance of disability income, disability protection, and even life insurance is more relevant.
Absolutely.
I just got 20 lashings because I forgot to mention our deal of the day earlier.
Right.
I apologize for that. We didn't. Let's do that now before I forget again, and I got to get lashings again.
No. He's saying lashings because I gave him the look.
You gave me the look.
Kind of a sensitive guy, isn't he?
I'm just a sensitive person.
No problem. Okay, so we talked about the deal of the day and the phone number. I'm going to give the phone number one more time, and folks, call in, and especially if you want a free consultation, call in and say, I'm interested in talking about disability coverage or disability risk management and having this discussion. That's all you need to say, and call this number is 1-855-346-4332 and say, I'm interested in information on disability coverage or life insurance coverage, because this is another piece that people often forget to take care of for themselves. You know, when it's automatic and the employer says it's part of our package and everybody here gets it, people get good coverage typically. But when it's not automatic, people don't think about it, and it is a huge risk.
Scott, the other thing that I want people to call in is if they've got a question that they would like to hear us talk about on the air, I invite them to call us up, give us the question, let us know about it. We'll do some research for you, and then we'll take it from there on the next or several radio shows down the line.
And if they're more comfortable, frankly, they can send me an email too as well. So it's just Scott, S-C-O-T-T .Wardell, W-A-R-D-E-L-L at Thrivent, THRIVENT.com. Send me your question, and we will try and plug it into one of the next shows. Thank you, Dennis, for saying that, because we're more than happy to answer those questions.
All right, we'll have more financial strategies with, obviously, Scott Wardell, Dennis Jasperson, and Tim Reinke coming up after this.
How would your financial life improve if you changed just one thing? Avoid ATM fees, make your gifts rather than buy them, protect yourself from identity theft, save more for your family's future. The list goes on. If you heard something today on financial strategies that motivates you to change one thing in your life, Thrivent Financial for Lutherans has free tips and resources you can use to do one thing differently. Find more at thrivent.com/one thing. Think about your finances, your lifestyle, your wants versus your needs. What one thing can you change today and see the impact tomorrow? Perhaps your family will save all your change for a month and donate it to charity. Maybe you'll finally write a will. Whether you choose to start simple or take a big step, that one thing can really make a difference. If you heard something today on financial strategies that motivates you to change one thing in your financial life, Thrivent Financial for Lutherans has free tips and resources you can use to do one thing differently. Find more at thrivent.com/one thing.
Welcome back, everyone. Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. Our guest this week, Dennis Jasperson and Tim Reinke joining us this week. And Scott, is the week that was a fairly cold week. And we're talking, I don't know how I'm trying to segue this, but we're talking about underemployed and self-employed. I'm not sure how I'm going to get this to work together.
Well, there is one other category we didn't talk about. It's called the serial employed.
The serial employed.
The person who, the serial business owner. I guess that's that person that just can't help himself but starting new businesses.
Gee, Scott, where would you fall in on that list?
It's crazy, isn't it?
Weird. I don't know.
It's one of those things. I just love it. I don't know. It's a ton of fun. And we're all, of course, for our listeners, we're talking about the Orchard.
Yes.
And, what other people...
Excuse me, but that's $49.50 per second at the radio station.
Right, exactly. And here's the thing is that most people spend their weekends relaxing. We spend our weekends working out there, and we just absolutely love it. It's great to have a project like that. But at any rate, today we have been talking, as you know, about the underemployed and the self-employed.
Like you.
Yep, to make sure that they have got their benefit packages in place. We just came around the corner from Labor Day, and Labor Day is a time when people start to sit, reflect, examine, and make some decisions. And that's why we're bringing this up right now, is so that you sit and examine and make some decisions about where you're at in your financial life, and do you have the coverage and the benefits that you might need to protect yourself, protect your family, and create wealth for the future.
Most business owners have a real good track record of doing their business planning, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're doing their own personal planning.
Right, as part of that. That's exactly right.
And that's where I truly enjoy, and I've been doing this for over 30 years. Scott, you've been doing this for close to 30 years.
Yep.
When folks will come in and have a conversation that says, I've always wanted to do this. How can you help me make that happen?
Right. It's a particular goal that they might have.
Correct.
Yep. Dennis, any other words about the self-employed that you wanted to make sure we capture? Because our next topic is really getting into long-term care. Anything else there?
Well, I think as far as being a self-employed individual, it is extremely important that we all sit down, because I'm self-employed, Tim is self-employed. We sit down and take stock once in a while. The idea of disability insurance is always important because you are the income-producing machine that manufactures it. What type of life insurance is necessary? All of those different plans that are provided to you by the group benefits are your responsibility to come together. And that's where finding a good quality professional to help you understand and migrate through some of those things is a good feature for you to think about.
Absolutely.
Well, let's talk about, we mentioned, Scott, long-term care benefits. They can be deduced by most business, or deducted.
Deduced? That's a new word, Adam.
I'm working on my English language here. I can deduce this. Let's try deducted. Does deducted make more sense in this exchange? Yep. All right. Long-term benefits can be deducted by most businesses. Who should be giving this consideration for those, especially long-term care?
Well, long-term care coverage, or insurance, if you will, is something that everybody, as they're planning for their retirement, should at least examine. I'm not saying they should all have it, but they should examine it, whether you are self-employed, employed, or whatever category you're in, because it is a risk. Most people, when I say, and I gave a seminar here earlier this week where one of the questions was, what are your risks to retirement? And right away people say, well, my money. And I say, well, what do you mean by that? Will I have enough, and will I run out? The next thing, I can predict it every single time, my health. And then we say, well, what about your health? Well, if I'm not completely well and I need, to get some kind of care provided for me, how is it going to come to me, and will I have the money to pay for it? So that's why we say you need to examine this closely. And we said when we started the show that one of the main purposes was to get people to pay attention to some important things in their financial lives and hopefully to help them down the path of making some wise decisions.
Well, Scott, it's like how you always say, how long is my money going to last is the first question, and then about 10, 15 years later, how long am I going to last?
How long am I going to last is the second half of the question, exactly. Now, people with great foresight then start to do this planning years before their actual retirement. Because when you start to do that, there's a couple things you're going to find. Because your question started with really a question of deductions, right? Mm-hmm. So a couple different things. First of all, most people get to have some deductibility or opportunity to deduct long-term care premiums, but for someone who is employed and not self-employed, so they have no self-employed income, so a normal employee, then they're going to put that in a category of within their itemized deductions, which means, of course, that it's going to have to reach that threshold with a whole bunch of other things of 7.5% of their income. So for them, it may or may not be deductible. It depends upon whether they reach the threshold. But self-employed people have a different opportunity. And that opportunity is that as long as they have self-employed income, so if your business is losing money, what I'm about to say is not, and you are the owner, so that you're not reporting any kind of profit, then there's a different, you probably won't be able to deduct premiums paid to a long-term care. On the other hand, it's very likely, and I wouldn't say assured, you need to see your tax professionals to make sure on this, but it's very likely that if you are making money and you're self-employed, that you're going to be able to take a tax deduction for the premium that gets paid on your long-term care. So what does that mean? That means you probably better look at this before you retire, right? Because if you retire from that, then you don't get necessarily that full benefit.
And before you fall off the teeter-totter of insurability.
Right, exactly. So before you get hit, sick or hurt, for sure. Now, I'll add one other thing to this, is because many long-term care programs, frankly, have an accelerated premium payment option, so that and you have to do a little bit of research to look into this, but what that means is you may be able to pay all your premiums in the first 7 or 10 years. It depends upon the company and the policy. And if that's the case, and you're accelerating your premiums so that you don't have to pay those premiums once you're retired or far into your retirement, well, gosh, what does that mean? Probably, I'm not promising this because you have to see your accountant, you have to see your tax professional, probably means greater deductibility early on. So, again, something for you to pay attention to.
You're talking about deducibility or deductibility?
Deductibility all the way here. So, and there are so many features that you have to look at long-term care. And, I have to just tell you my bias, guys, and see if you agree with this. But people tend to approach long-term care and looking at it as if they have to get the whole enchilada at once. So, for instance, I got my long-term care policy when I was 51 years old. Okay, why did I do that? Well, it wasn't because I'm not in good health or I was worried about becoming in bad health. It's because of where the premiums were. But on the other hand, what I did is I looked at it and said, I got to get some base coverage in place here. And if, in fact, it looks like I need more later, I'll add some on, either to the existing policy, and I know I'd have to go through underwriting all over again, or get another policy to add it on. So I'm playing the odds on this one a little bit by saying if I get the whole thing, the whole big policy at once, it's going to cost me a lot of premium dollars, most likely. On the other hand, if I get most of what I need and add some on later, I got the insurability. I got it when I was most insurable, and I got it at a premium that is mostly set by my age.
And at age 51, Scott, when you start a plan at age 51, most plans have some type of an inflation factor that will allow the plan to expand, that will help you reach that goal later on.
Absolutely, and mine does. And the other part of design that I want people to ask their financial advisor about, their financial planner, to make sure that they go in prepared for this kind of discussion, is to say there's many times when you can actually put 2 lives on one policy. It's usually called something like a shared care. That's one way in which you might be able to reduce the overall premium outlay for long-term care policies. Now, it might be the right architecture for you, and it might not, but be prepared to ask that question. Should I be looking at a shared policy with my spouse? Because it's often a way to get some efficiency in the long-term care.
Right.
Okay. So,
Well, as we're talking, I know I've had some friends of mine that have been downsized and are still looking for work. Well, how is their benefit situation different from those who have found a job? Is there anything that they would have to do differently in managing their retirement plan? Because, like I said, I've had a couple that have, they've been downsized for better or for worse.
right. And I'd say the first thing that they have to do is figure out their cash flow. Cash flow is king in so many different venues. It's certainly important when you're looking at retirement, but boy, I'll tell you what, when you have been downsized in some fashion, and let's say this is a situation we run into all the time, and I bet you, Dennis, you run into this as well, where you were both husband and wife were working, and now one or the other is laid off. You built a lifestyle around the income from the both of you, and here you are with 1 plus maybe 1/2, or 1 plus 1 with no benefits. And so you really got to take a really hard look at your cash flow. Again, today's discussion was very focused on those people that are not under the employment of somebody else, and they might be an independent contractor, or they might be a self-employed person and have always been. So call that number. It is 1-855-346-4332, and just say, send me the information on, it can be long-term care, it can be disability, it can be retirement plans. We're more than happy to send that information out. You tell us which piece you want, and we'll send it out for you to take a look at today. We've got booklets on every one of those pieces.
Scott, it's been a pleasure. Our time's winding down once again. Thanks again to our guests, Dennis.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. I look forward to this every single time Scott invites me.
And Tim, thanks a lot for joining us as well this week.
Yep, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Scott, that'll do it for this week. We'll be back again next week with more financial strategies with Scott Wardell.
Thanks so much.
We hope you've enjoyed the past hour of Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. While various products may be discussed during the course of this program, please note that these discussions are intended only to educate you about financial topics. They are broad in scope and do not consider your individual personal financial situation. You should work with a qualified financial professional in collaboration with your attorney and tax advisor before implementing any financial decisions which will affect your personal financial situation. Thrivent financial representatives cannot provide legal or tax advice. Your local Thrivent representatives are Wayne Grunkley and Alan Sogstead, 215 Atlantic Avenue, Morris. Call 589-1731. Join us again next week for Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell on KMRS Morris.